سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. قل رب زدني علما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إنما حرم عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل به لغير الله فمن اضطر غير باغ ولا عاد فلا إثم عليه إن الله غفور رحيم. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. So continuing with these verses of the Muharramat mentioned, and obviously, as we mentioned earlier, that this is very generally spoken of, and these are very sort of general guidelines that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in these ayats. However, there's many what we call juziyat. There's many injunctions that we're going to be looking at, and we need to be aware of, particularly because of the complications that we live in the present day times, and we have to be aware of many things. So we talked a bit about Meta, and we mentioned that there are two things which actually die of their own natural death, but they are legal in Islam, and that is fish and also jarad, or the locusts. Also, another point that it's also mentioned, we're going to see that later on in Surah Al-Ma'idah, inshallah ta'ala, but we also have the game which is hunted. And previously people used to actually live by that. Now when I was young, we also used to, the whole winter was spent on the meat of venison and elk that we used to hunt in the winter time. So however, this is not as prevalent as it used to be, but still people do hunt. And what is the injunction here? Now the injunction is this, is that two ways that they used to hunt back in those days, and that was, one was with the birds, the hawks that used to actually catch, and also with the they had the hunting dogs as well, and also they used to shoot with the arrow. So we'll hear about the injunctions about the hunting with the dogs and with the birds inshallah later on Surah Ma'idah. Here we want to talk about hunting with the arrow. So hunting with the arrow, you say Bismillah when you shoot the arrow. So that stands in lieu of the Bismillah, of the Tasmiyah. And the arrow itself, being that it has a blade, it actually cuts. It actually cuts the animal. So it actually, there's a bleeding which takes place. At the same time, if you find the animal that has still not died by the time that you've reached that animal, and he's still alive, so now you will be able to actually slaughter him in the proper way. For example, a deer or an elk or something of that nature. And if not, if he's already dead, then having said Bismillah and being cut with the sharp blade of the arrow, so that's okay. However, now we usually hunt with guns. So gun is a different story, because it doesn't cut, it just pierces. So this is more of the nature of mawquda, there's something which has been hit on the head. So something which has been hit on the head, or it falls and it dies of any other way other than being cut, being slaughtered properly. So this is all considered meta. Now this is another thing, is that some of the slaughtering practices that they have now, even though they may actually cut the throat, but what they do is they have a pneumatic weapon, or not a weapon actually, a pneumatic sort of hammer that hits these cows and knocks them out. It may even kill them, you see. So this also presents a big problem, And then we have also, the problem of the chickens. The chicken is a big problem here, because the chicken used to be all cut by hand, you see. And now you've got these big machines that just revolve around, and maybe somewhere somebody says Bismillah and then the machine is actually cutting, so there's no tasmiyah and there's no cutting. So this should all be, avoided. And even though there is a difference of opinion in some of these areas, however, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what he says, Da' ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk. Leave what you are doubtful for that which there's no doubt. Halal is plenty. We're not forced, to eat these things which are doubtful. Um, there's a few more things that we wanted to mention as well. Um, if the animal is considered a dead animal, so can we benefit from that animal in any way? So the meat of that animal and anything that you eat from it is obviously out of the question. If it's out of the question, it's also out of the question to buy it and sell it. Some of us have, shops and stores, and we actually we have some of this. It's actually carrion, meat, which is. So we may not be eating it, but we're buying it and we're selling it, and the money from that we're eating. So it's also haram. It's having that very negative impact on us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from that. However, there are three things from the meta which are permissible with conditions. Number one, bones and hair. Because actually the meat, the blood flows through it. So those parts of the animal which blood actually flows through it, has connection. So those things become haram. There's no way to purify them. However, bones do not have blood flowing through them as such. When bones are dry, they become clean. Similarly, the hair of the animals, except for the pig. The pig, everything of it is unclean and is not usable. Otherwise, the hair and the bones, and also the skin of the animal. Once Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, there was a dead animal and it was disposed of, and Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam asked, "What did you do?" He threw it away. It was a dead animal. He said, "Why have you not benefited from the skin?" So if you take the skin and it is actually tanned properly, what we call dibagh in Arabic. So in that is a process, all of the moisture and all of the blood and everything is extracted. And if it's properly tanned, then that skin becomes halal, except for the skin of pig, which is very prevalent. So we have to be careful about that. That doesn't become clean in any way, shape, or form. Lastly, we have the soap, which is also made from the fat of the animals, which is probably generally unclean. So abstaining from that or looking towards soaps which are not made from that will be much better. There is a difference of opinion about that because it's something that we don't eat, something that we use on our skin, it's washed away. Still, you wouldn't want to have these things on your body if it's not necessary. There are other alternatives. We have soaps which are made of vegetable oils. We have soap which are actually liquid soap, which are much better actually, and the other thing about the soaps is that generally they have, besides the tallow, which is animal fat, it has a lot of toxins which are otherwise, if they may not be haram, but they are very toxic to the body. So that's not something that we would want to be involved in. And cheese. Cheese also has an issue because cheese is from milk. Now milk should be fine. The problem is that there is a thing which we call minfaha, which is rennet. Rennet is made from the intestines of a suckling child of a cow, of a pig, of a goat, whatever. So traditionally they used to take that, even from the time of our Nabi alayhi salatu. This was the traditional way of making cheese. So obviously if that animal is slaughtered Islamically, there's no issue. If it's not, there's an issue. Okay? Again, there is a discussion there and a debate. However, again, leaving things which are doubtful is going to be much more beneficial. So cheese, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, generally we can find the ingredients. So when we look at cheese, we can find either microbial rennet. So it's actually, it's not connected to animal whatsoever. There's also vegetable rennet. And there's also different types of chemical cultures that are made that are not animal sources. So we can look at that and we can find plenty of cheeses. I'm very fond of cheese myself. And I find no problem if you take a little bit extra time and just check, so you can easily find those which are made by vegetable rennet or rennet which is not animal sourced. And of course we have many more things to discuss, and I think that's sufficient for today. Wa akhir da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalamu alaikum.